she took the gold, all the gold that was in the Maltese embassy, and personally gave it to Mussolini. And if you know anything about the condition of Italy at that time, it wasn't a very trusted country, and they couldn't get anything on credit from anybody. They had to have gold to really operate. So here she is, an ally, turns communist, takes in American prisoners, and got us a passport, got us papers that said we were working for the German government, and we had the free run of Rome, and they paid us to do this. Italian partisans paid us to do this. And we could go anywhere we wanted to go in Rome. By this time, of course, we had Italian clothes on, and I looked like a Dapper Dan, I thought. And we did. We went out into the streets of Rome and into the bars and wherever else we could go, and just don't say anything, don't do anything, but you'll find what you're looking for. And it's amazing that that's what happened. I don't know how many we finally ended up finding, but what we would do is spot these guys, and yeah, that's who they were, and that's what they were trying to do, get back up to Rome, or get back up into Europe. And the Italian partisans were unbelievable. They would get these men, tell them what they were going to do for them, and they would either have us take them to the shore, where they'd put them in a boat, take them out to Navy ships that were in the sea, at sea, and pick these people up to take them back to Europe. Now, you might think, you know, one or two, but hundreds. Or they'd make arrangements for a Piper Cub to pick these people up and take them out into the boats that were out into the ocean. And this is war going on. I mean, you know, there's a war going on, and all this is taking place, and I'm saying, this is unbelievable. You know, this can't happen. But it sure did. Now, I know you've been here a long time, but I do have to tell you a couple of stories that might be of interest. Since our guardian was such a trusted fascist, she was invited to all the German festivities that were going on in Rome. Now, Rome was supposed to be an open city, and it was, except it was full of Germans. And one day, Field Marshal Kesselring is coming to Rome to inspect the German forces in Rome and to assess the position. And she finds all this out and telling us all this. And they're going to have an opera at the Rome Opera House, and she is invited. So that the day of the opera, some young man comes to the door with 2 tickets to go to the opera. And she said, well, I'm not going to go to the opera, but I want you to take my daughter, Gemma, to the opera. So we get on the bus, transfer to a streetcar, go down to the Rome Opera House, get up to the theater, give them our tickets. Everybody comes to Sieg Heil, all this good crap. And they usher us down into the theater. Center aisle, all the way down to the front, second row from the front. And Gemma goes in, sits down, and I'm sitting on the aisle. And if anybody would have told me what's going to happen next could happen, I would say you are absolutely off your tree. So we're sitting there waiting for the opera to start, and it's a little late. And all of a sudden, the big fanfare goes up, and everybody stands up, and the German salutes and all the rest of this jazz, and in comes the entourage of Field Marshal Kesselring. And guess what? They come down the center aisle to the second row. The usher comes down with them, and he's said, you know, move out of your seats because we've got somebody that's going to sit in the row. There's 14 chairs in the front, in the second row, and these soldiers or officers or German officers. I couldn't tell one from the other, but they all marched in. The last person in is Field Marshal Kesselring. He sits in the third seat. Gemma comes back in, sits in the second seat, and I'm sitting on the aisle. And one person away, I'm sitting next to the highest ranking German officer in the whole friggin' Nazi organization. The dumb guy doesn't know who I am. So, the opera, by the way, was Madame Butterfly. If you know anything about Madame Butterfly, Lieutenant Pickering, who falls in love with this Japanese gal and comes to visit her all the time and brings American goodies into Japan and her household for her. And one of the things he brings in, Lucky Strike cigarettes. And I'm sitting there now and I haven't had a Lucky Strike cigarette in I don't know how long. But the opera goes on and the opera ends. We get back out of the aisle, the entourage moves out, and I'm back on the streets of Rome. Now, like I said before, if you believe this, that's good because it really happened. But it's hard to believe that you could be, or you never know, ever know who the person next to you really is. You never know. And so that's a story that is just beside this thing. Anyway, my tour there lasted until June the 5th of that year. And June the 5th was liberated DE Day. So the Americans then and the British and a Polish group of part of the Polish army were going to make the capture of Rome. But by this time, the Germans had all left. There weren't any Germans there at all. But we did get information as to what they wanted us to do. One of the things they wanted us to do was to go to the Tiber River and check out the bridges along the Tiber River to make sure they weren't mined after the Germans had pulled out. So I went to one of the bridges at the Tiber River with Jack, and we checked the bridge. Everything was fine. There was nobody around. And pretty soon the American troops came, and we said, the bridge is clear, go across. And they said, well, what are you going to do? What are we going to do with you? And I said, I don't know what you're going to do with me, but, tell me what's going to happen. Well, of course, I'm dressed in civilian clothes. They have no idea who I am. And they said, well, we're going to have to hold you and send you to a prison compound. Okay, so fortunately, about maybe a week before I left Rome, somehow or other, they found we were notified that they were going to raid the house that we were living in. And evidently, it was discovered that she was really not who they thought she was. And we were living there. So, the young man comes to the door that day and he said, and Rome is an open city, but it has a curfew. And nobody out after dark. And he said, well, just before dark I'll come, and then you've got to follow me, and we'll take you to a safer place than where you are now. Sure enough, two guys come that evening and started running through the streets of Rome and asking us to follow them, Jack and I. We followed, I don't know how far we went, but we were running for quite some time. And they said, well, now tomorrow morning, you'll be out of the city of Rome, and we'll take you to a safer place.